Some parts of Tshwane will be without water from 7 a.m. tomorrow. The city has announced an emergency shutdown of water supply to repair a major pipeline leak. Residents are urged to use water sparingly.
Residents are informed of an emergency shutdown of water supply which is scheduled to start tomorrow, 19 August 2023 at 7 to repair a major pipe leak in Neck. The point of the repair work to the 400 diameter pipe along Nelson Mandela Drive between BMW and Mercedes-Benz dealerships is expected to be completed around 5 p.m. Thereafter, water supply will be reinstated. Residents are informed that it will take some time for the system to fill completely and water supply to normalize. Areas that will be affected include Arcadia, Trevena, Sunnyside, Freedom Park, part of McClinic north of the railway line, part of Pretoria Central or CBD from Railway to Minar Street. Consumers in the mentioned areas are urged to use water sparingly. All properties dependent on water supply for their daily operations are advised to ensure sufficient water storage to remain operational for the duration of the shutdown.
On Wednesday, Zimbabweans head to the polls to elect a president and members of the legislature. The presidential race is largely between President Emmerson Mnangagwa of ZANU-PF and Citizens Coalition for Change leader advocate Nelson Chamisa. But to get more of an informed analysis on these elections, we're now joined telephonically by Dr. Gideon Chitanga, a research associate at Wits University's African Center for the Study of the United States. Doctor, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening. It's always a pleasure to have you. So what are the sentiments on the ground of the people of Zimbabwe leading up to the elections on Wednesday?
I think that as common in Zimbabwe, you get very polarized, divided views between the supporters of the key parties or representatives of the key parties. There have been complaints from the Citizens Coalition for Change about the playing field issues related to as of yesterday, printing of ballot papers. The failure for the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission to provide the voters' roll, which by law the opposition is entitled to, but they allege that the government is impeding deliberately the processes for ZEC to provide the voters' roll, or ZEC is deliberately just delaying, allowing the opposition to access the voters' roll as a way of flouting electoral regulations in favor of ZANU-PF. They are overall complaints about issues of human rights, freedom of expression and association with respect to issues of violence. But by and large, I think that compared to the previous elections in Zimbabwe since 2000, there's a level of stability, maybe not necessarily peace, but the scale of violence is quite subtle and not necessarily explicit and obvious. And the apparent obvious violence that characterize the elections in Zimbabwe seems for now to be limited. And this points to, I think, political actors, politicians, acting in restraint and consciously noting that, I guess, ZANU-PF and President Mnangagwa specifically is worried of an election outcome that is tainted, that would be disputed, particularly considering that this is his second term. So I think to a large extent, we are going to witness an election, and I think everyone else in Zimbabwe is geared towards the elections. we wait to see the voting process itself and the outcome.
Now, the Zim Electoral Commission Chair, Ms. Priscilla Chigumba, has reiterated the independence of the Commission, going as far as saying that it's not influenced by any government, individuals, or any other organization. Why do you think it's important for her to overemphasize on this?
It's an important statement, I think, except that it does not dispel that ZEC is an independent institution, but rather reinforces the suspicions and probably her views being seen as reactive. Historically, the ZANU-PF has had like deep control of the whole electoral infrastructure and administration and the institutions which run elections. The previous elections have all been disputed either in a very comprehensive way or some issues relating to the role that ZEC has played, as well as chunks of the Electoral Act. Particularly some of the issues that I have highlighted, and the issue that ZEC is staffed by entirely people who have a military background or who have not clearly left the military institutions, where the military institutions are directly controlled by the ruling party ZANU-PF. The second thing is that the commissioners are directly appointed by the president and are viewed within Zimbabwe and outside is extremely partisan. On key issues that would concern public interest on on national issues, ZEC is generally seen to project a partisan perspective, particularly in terms of aligning itself with ZANU-PF. In terms of just the administration of elections and when critical issues like counting, either the questions of revising the counting, and a whole lot of matters administrative, ZEC rarely move towards a direction that is independent and probably seen to be legitimate, at least in the views of the opposition and civil society. So this has been a historical problem for the Zimbabwe Election Commission, that the institution is not independent, is wholly beholden to ZANU-PF and particularly the president. And because of that, part of allegations of rigging of elections in Zimbabwe are around the suspicions, which I think are very substantial, of the administrative failures, the process that ZEC it drives, which is seen as partisan, and the fact that when it is very critical and ZEC is required to be transparent, its process tends to be very opaque and suspicious. So the integrity of the Zimbabwe Election Commission is tainted, and it will take, I think, a lot for Zimbabwean citizens to really trust ZEC processes, its admin processes, its work is determined by the Electoral Act.
And staying on those trust issues, I mean, a pre-election debate was held in Johannesburg, and we saw opposition parties raising the alarm and accusing ZANU-PF of violence and instilling fear. Do you think that this will spill over to the days of election?
Yeah, well, you always, I think there is a line between what the opposition is saying is legitimate fact and a bit of politicking. To be fair, this election compared to other elections previously, so if you go back to 2000, 2002, 2005, 2008, and 2013, I think the elections are quite substantially stable, maybe not peaceful, because the fear and intimidation can be very subtle and still have the desired effect for the perpetrators. But I get a sense that the level of stability quite manageable. People are still able to go to their rallies and express themselves to an extent. And I'm not so sure about the conditions in the raw areas because he organized violence and intimidation tends to be very intense in the raw areas and organized around traditional leaders and council leaders and local community leaders and war veterans. But even with that, there is a sense that the electoral environment, the election environment in Zimbabwe is relatively better than in the previous election. So I believe that voters will be able to express themselves, to legitimately express themselves. I also think that the key candidates, the presidential candidates, will be quite nervous because both the Citizens Coalition for Change and the ruling ZANU-PF under President Mnangagwa have very serious divisions and in the case of ZANU-PF, it's quite scary because of its structure and opaque internal rules. People do not really express themselves openly, so it's unpredictable what they will do once they are in the ballot box. For the opposition, it's basically that the emergence of Chamisa and the formation of the CCC has also been problematic in the sense that the party did not really demonstrate intra-party democracy in terms of creating structures which do not exist. All the key players were not elected, including Chamisa. He is the leader of the opposition. He did not subject himself to an election. So either it's a party that is emerging and is going through the process to form itself on the basis of a constitution that is still to emerge, policies which still have to emerge. The manifesto was only launched about 2 weeks ago. I think ZANU-PF did not launch a manifesto. It's a unique and a very interesting contestation. But also I think what is key is that you see that there is the level of tension in terms of the campaign between ZANU-PF and the MDC, between Mnangagwa and Chamisa, is comparatively less than in the previous elections 5 years ago or in the elections that previously happened between Mugabe and Morgan Tsvangirai. So it's quite an interesting, I think, context to witness.
All right, Doctor, thank you so much for your time. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for this evening. Of course, a very interesting race between Advocate Chamisa as well as the ruling president being Mnangagwa, with the Zimbabwean elections taking place this coming Wednesday. That